Welcome back to Logic. My name's Tom, and in this video, we are going to talk a little bit about the persuasive paper and the putting together the rough draft part of this process. So, um, what I want to do is just kind of go over some things that you might want to be aware of. Writing an argumentative paper is somewhat different than writing something like a report where you're just kind of saying what happened or what someone thinks or talking about a historical event. Um, and also, since this is logic and this is philosophy, the bar um, of kind of adequacy in terms of your reasoning is a little bit higher, right? So you're expected to be a little bit more critical, engaged a little bit more critically in in this process and exemplify that in your writing. So let me just I'm going to kind of go over an example paper, just kind of talk through it a little bit. And the first thing I want to mention is that you should definitely um, use the resources at hand. You've already written an outline where you kind of put together, two different positions and said a little bit about different reasons for holding the opposing positions, right? And you've also got some feedback on that. And there's also, some things in this module to hand out and a little bit about the rubric. And so use all those things, read those things through before you write out the rough draft. Um, so, so I would, start with the outline that you've already put together. Pull it out, take a look at it, look at the things that you cited there, and then try to figure out what argument you kind of want to make and which points seem most promising, right? And then kind of and go from there. I say, pick one of the three supporting reasons, right? Because the idea here is you really want to expand. You don't want to get a lot of more information. You want to expand on a very little bit of information and really kind of build it out and make all the logical connections very explicit. Okay. And you also want to make use of the stuff we've learned. We've learned a bunch of forms of inference, valid forms of inference, modus ponens, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, all these kinds of things. So you want to start incorporating that idea. The first paragraph, I say, you want to motivate your topic and you want to make sure that you present your thesis. You should say, I'm going to argue that such and such is correct, or this is what we should do, or whatever. For my example argument, I'm just going to do like an argument for universal health care in the United States, right? So I'm going to argue that we ought to have a single payer system in the United States, right? And so right off the bat, you want to know a little bit about what a single payer system is and how this works and so on and so forth. Okay. And then you want to motivate this topic. So for example, in our example, you would want to say something about, I don't know, rising healthcare costs or how central it was in previous elections or whatever, right? Just make it compelling to your reader so they see the context, why this is important, and then they're able to kind of follow you through your argument. All right. The next thing you want to do is give your main argument. And I say label your argument as inductive or deductive. Now, I think I use the example of healthcare because there are definitely two different strategies here, right? So one strategy would be to say something like, okay, I'm going to argue that, we should adopt a single payer system for universalized healthcare in the United States. And the reason being is because, it would be cheaper, something like this, right? And then you talk about, how much, healthcare costs have risen, and you can give all kinds of data and show that, we are very administrative heavy or whatever it is, right? And you give all these kind of facts, and then you kind of implicitly assume that, a cheaper system is better, right? And maybe you say that. Um, but that kind of argument is more inductive, right? It's based on statistics, it's based on facts, right? This is how much it costs. People get billed $5 for an aspirin. MRI is different costs for different people and all this kind of stuff. And then implicit behind that is that you think that this is bad, right? That's an inductive argument. A deductive argument would be another kind of line on universal healthcare, is the idea that healthcare is a right? Everyone's entitled to healthcare, and that no one should be denied healthcare based on, their economic status, right? That's more of a deductive argument, right? That's talking about the concept of healthcare. It's talking about the concept of being human, human rights, right? Human rights are not something that's like based on facts, right? It's based on the concept of what it is to be human. So think about that for a second. When you're making your argument, are you trying to argue based on certain conceptual distinctions, certain ideas about what we ought to do, certain rights we should have, or are you making more of an argument based on giving all these facts, we should draw this kind of conclusion, right? So and I also say make it clear what your premises and your conclusion are. One way to do this that's really good is to just write out your argument in one of the valid forms of argument like that we've gone over, so, or our valid forms of inference. So write out like the modus ponens in that very kind of stilted fashion with premise one, premise two, conclusion. Try to boil it down to that. And then kind of write sentences around it to a certain extent, like fill in the gaps in between these to kind of make it sound a little more natural. And just doing that will kind of give you a certain kind of framework to your argument where it's very solid. You have this, valid argumentative framework, or it's a very strong inductive inference you're making, and then you just kind of fill that out with certain things that will just kind of make it a little more intuitive to your reader. Um, then I'd say in your third and fourth paragraphs, then you want to support your premises, right? So if you have, something like modus ponens is your argument, um, then you want to support that conditional. Why should I believe your conditional? And why should I believe the second premise, right? Give a little story about why those things are supported. And sometimes you give a deductive argument, and then you want to provide facts and statistics to support each premise, right? And if you do give, conversely, if you do like an inductive argument where you're going to say like, okay, look at these stats, we should make this inference based on it, then you want to support those statistics, right? And statistics can be analyzed and scrutinized. That's something to be well aware of. If you're going to use statistics, you want to say why they're right, not just that they're right. Support them either by reputation of the place where you got them, or based on consider some alternative statistics and kind of try to head them off, whatever it is. But analyze those statistics and don't kind of just take them at face value. And then the last major kind of part here in terms of the body of the paper before the conclusion is to consider an objection. Now this, you should be able to pull from your outline, right? In your original outline, you put 3 reasons for the position X or whatever, and then you have 3 reasons for position Y, which is the opposite of reason X, right? So like if it was abortion or something, you'd have 3 reasons pro-life, to adopt a pro-life stance, and then 3 reasons to adopt a pro-choice stance, right? And so now if you're doing your paper and you're arguing pro-life, then you can just pull one of the reasons that you already pulled from the pro-choice stance when you were considering both sides of this issue, and use that as the objection you consider. Of course, you want to pull one that's going to be relevant, that's going to be, the most pointed towards your position. But oftentimes, considering an objection is a way to anticipate someone who's going to disagree with your position, right? And so you want to do that, and you want to use it to your own advantage by kind of like saying something like, oh, you might think thus and such. But actually, as we kind of look at what I said and how I argued, you can actually counter that in this way. And it's always best, and it's really the best thing to do is to use it as an opportunity to develop your ideas further, right? Um, but again, last thing I will say here is that this is a persuasive paper, right? And the best way to think about this is to think that you're supposed to be persuading someone. And a person who needs persuading is someone who probably does not already see things the way you do. So that should be your audience. Someone who disagrees with you or is somewhat indifferent to the topic you're writing about. Don't preach to the choir, right? Don't just say like, obviously this is true and everyone knows, blah blah blah. That's not the way to do this. It's not the way to develop your own thoughts as well. Writing a paper like this where you're kind of anticipating objections, thinking about the opposing point of view is a way to get really clear about what you think, right? So use that to develop your view as good as possible, right? um and so that's just some comments about this, some pointers, and good luck with everything, and I'll be giving feedback on these. That's it for now.